I think a good learning experience is one that you would remember years after it happened.
Providing opportunities for the learner to have real-world experiences.
For me, I think that a good learning experience is when the students are 100% engaged.
The imagination has to be captured, has to be hooked.
I think a good learning experience is something that's authentic. It's something where students can relate it to their own world.
I believe a good learning experience is made when you have a passionate teacher, and that passion of that teacher can create a learning experience for students in something they may not even think they were interested in learning. I believe that students are inspired by curiosity, by confidence in themselves as learners, and by passionate teachers. Very rarely is a student inspired in a situation where they don't have someone who has lit a fire to help them be curious about something that they feel confident that they can achieve.
Providing a learning experience where the kids feel that they can trust who they're in the room with so that they can take those risks. Because then I think open trust provides opportunities for the learners to be more creative and inspired in the learning and do things that they don't necessarily think there's limits around, because they understand that they can do things and express themselves freely within a classroom setting or within a setting outside of a traditional classroom.
I think what really inspires students is their teachers and the adults around them. If they show that their teachers are excited and their teachers are passionate about something, they're also going to show that passion. And I know when I get really excited about a certain idea and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I am, if my energy level is high, the kids' energy level is high for it.
What I think inspires the students is that the content relates to their lives. And I think there's a lot of ways that teachers can do that, and there's a lot of ways that they can't do that. I have heard of and I've seen teachers that have started a lesson by saying, okay class, let's just get through this. And if you look at learning like that, of course it's uninspired. But a lot of research has shown that if you're very clear on what the learning objective is from the get-go, and maybe what are some questions that you're investigating as a class, what are some of the knowledge and skills that you are going to have kids come away with. I mean, there's boatloads of research that show that if you're very clear about the objective early on, students are a lot more likely to attain it.
What I think inspires students, first of all, is an open environment in a classroom. And what that means is that when they come into a classroom, it's comfortable. And so they can break down some of their walls. And if they have a good relationship with the teacher and they have a good relationship with the staff or with the students, then that's when the creative fireworks happen for a student. When those barriers are put in place, students are on guard. So they can't quite put themselves out there or develop something that may be a little wacky or weird that could change the world, could change the school, could change a lot of things. So I think it really comes with comfortability. How comfortable is the classroom? And that, again, goes to how we're setting up our classes as teachers.
I think what inspires them is, as much as we focus on the academics and the content, so much of this is really an emotional game. And so what inspires them is when they feel agency and power and meaning to what they just did. So I go back to the idea of those, I have a student now who's a marine veterinarian, because she just had this amazing moment of taking blood from a sea turtle and being handed this tool and saying, all right, you now know what you're doing, why you're doing it. And, for days she talked about it, and you could tell that it profoundly affected even the questions that she asked from that moment forward, because you could see in the back of her head, she could envision herself as being someone who took care of animals. And so almost every question from that day forward was informed. You could see the shadow of this activity that just captured her imagination, that just impacted her on this personal, like I could make a difference by doing this for the rest of my life.
I grew up riding horses. One of my very first trainers, Delane was her name, and she would do things for me because I'm very much a hands-on learner. When you ride horses, you have to keep your hands, straight, and you need to keep your thumbs like on the reins. And so when I was little, I would start to go like this, and I would start to have my hands like move down instead of having my thumbs up. And I remember her coming up to me one day, and she was like, have you ever, she's like, have you ever thought about holding something when you're riding? And I'm like, yeah, I hold my reins. Like, I was 6 years old. I'm also like, yeah, I hold my reins when I'm riding. And she was like, what I want you to think of is, she's like, I want you to think that you have two little tiny birds in your hands, and you're petting the tops of their heads, but you can't let them go. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was maybe 5 or 6 years old when she taught me that.
I took some leadership classes in high school and had a really dynamic leadership instructor who used to teach mindfulness with the U.S. ski team. And so he brought that into our classroom. And one of the things he did was he taught us about the peak zone. And the peak zone is all about how you make decisions and how you act on a day-to-day basis. And you want to stay in this peak zone. If you aren't mindful at the time and staying right in the moment, it's easy to fall out and never quite work to your abilities. However, on the other end, if you're too hyped up and too overly focused on it, you lose some of the key parts of that situation. So he was really interactive and had us look at real life situations that we were dealing with in our school life. And one of the things that he always talked about was that adults oftentimes say, just wait until the real world comes. And he used to talk about how the real world is now, and your students in the real world. And so the decisions you make and how you work through those are really important.
As a student, I can think of one of the most impacting to me as a class of situations where a teacher has posed a very tricky problem, and it's a tricky problem. It's almost like a puzzle box. And when you solve it, when you have that personal aha moment where everything, the tumblers click and the lock opens. It really is that feeling almost like Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you hear the click and you did it. You know that door is now open to you because you just, that's how it all goes together. And I figured it out on my own. That's a neat moment.
The things that inspire me to be able to inspire young people with their learning experiences is, I think, the joy and the curiosity of learning itself, and also help people see the increased rigor in what they're able to achieve when they're dedicated to mastering something, whether it's a content or a skill. And as a teacher, as a facilitator, we can coach them through whatever that is.
If it's something that's inspired me, it's going to be something that I'm passionate about. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else is going to be passionate about what I'm passionate about. So I guess sharing your passions and understanding what part of the passion that I have that others are really interested in, and probably building from that.
So how do you know the students are learning? It really goes back to the age-old question that students ask in multiple subjects. When am I ever going to use this stuff? And if you can't answer that and show the connection, then they aren't going to see the value in it. So they know they're learning when they can use it. And there's those times when you're building a fence and you go, oh, that's why. But if you don't make that connection throughout your lessons, it may be 10 years before they realize why they did something they did. Or the idea of taking a liberal arts curriculum that's vast and different, and no one ever explained to people that part of it is critical thinking. Like, part of the reason why you take multiple classes that you may have not any interest in is about creating skills for you to think wider and broader than you typically would. So it's about how we make our connections. And so if we can make the connections as teachers of real life scenarios or how this is used, and show that with our lessons, that's when students know they're learning.
We need to think critically about more things more often And if I had to be honest, I've worked in more than one institutions where critical thinking is really only accepted in this box with this lens. If we were to take critical thinking and examine all of what we do, oh no, Eric, I think you missed the point. No, I think I got the point. And I think that's going to be the most important thing, is not knowledge, it's not creating new knowledge, but thinking very creatively about what we do know and how it's applied and what the consequences of that application is. Helen Keller once said, people do not like to think critically because thinking leads to conclusions, and conclusions can be unpleasant. I'm just this guy that gets a chance of producing the Jedi that will save us all. And I sometimes feel very small in that I haven't done a good enough job and I haven't produced enough Jedi, because the human species needs a lot more Jedi in the years to come. And so I'm doing my best. I'm trying to create Jedi, but sometimes not fast enough.